What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Brilliant Resilient Experience.
It's a long journey. The martial arts journey as a whole, it should be never ending.
Today we have a very special guest. He is an MMA fan, MMA enthusiast, MMA practitioner, and he's also an MMA content creator, just kind of getting started with creating content and doing MMA breakdowns. So I'm really excited to bring him on. I'm excited to learn more about his experiences as a fan and as a practitioner of mixed martial arts. So let's go ahead and bring on Michael Troche. Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? I've been having audio struggles lately, so if anything happens with my microphone today, I might lose my mind, but I apologize in advance if I have any issues. I think we'll be okay, but...
Yeah, no, technical issues are always the worst to deal with, but I completely understand. I deal with them also, so I get it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so
mean?
Did you just kind of start creating content with MMA?
No, so it's funny because I initially started making content like before I started training when I was still in college because, with COVID and everything, the whole world shut down and all sports altogether went away. And the first sport that was really brought back to the limelight was the UFC. It was MMA. And I had always kind of been in and out of like my interest with MMA as a whole, but I had been following the UFC since I was a child. Like realistically, I'm only 23, so like it's only been around so long. But thing being, I started recording videos while I was still in school and kind of put it to the side at one point because I had to focus on school and like getting my degree, which kind of revolved around stuff like it revolved around communications, which involves making content or like, informing people of stuff, which is part of what we do.
Right.
So yeah,
that's funny. I kind of feel like I had a similar, like I was doing work that wasn't related to MMA or content creation, but I feel like it definitely has a big influence on my content, like just my interview style and different things that I've learned. Like I was in sales for a long time and I worked in retail when I was younger, like back when I was in like high school and a little bit after high school. So I can definitely relate.
Different life experiences will definitely just sort of allow you to, like implement different styles and different like ways of like, informing people, I should say, or giving off a certain type of energy or, informing them of what they want to know, I should say.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So how did you, I guess, first get started with training martial arts? You train at Carolina Combat, right?
Yeah, it's funny. So I've only been training martial arts as a whole, like fully committed for a little over a year. And I joined Carolina Combat just this past July. So I've only been a member of that gym for like 4 or 5 months.
Sure.
But the tone that's set in that gym with the fight team just initially is incredible. Like it gives off such a impression of pure professionalism and just pure like intention, you know what I mean? There's a purpose to what they're doing. They're striving to put themselves above and beyond and test themselves at the highest level, and it's admirable. And before that, I was training with Spencer Fisher because he is originally from Cashers, North Carolina. Do you know about Spencer Fisher? I'm sure you do.
Does he fight in the UFC?
He did.
I can't, it doesn't,
He
I can't
fought from
think of like what he
05
looks like
to
or anything, but
2012. He was
I'll have to
sort
look
of
him
like
up. I
yeah,
probably have seen him.
once you see him you'll recognize him, but he was one of the original staples for 155 for that division. He had a war with Sam Stout. His fight with Sam Stout. He had a trilogy with Sam Stout that was like considered to this day as one of the best trilogies in the sport. But just being able to pick his brain initially about MMA as a whole and being able to learn techniques and just kind of indulge in the life that he was brought up in as a fighter, it was incredible, and it helped me transition to Carolina Combat relatively smoothly, and I'm very appreciative for that. And I'm also very appreciative for just how welcoming everybody at CCS is. They're awesome people.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes a big difference. I've trained at a few different gyms and I just changed gyms too. It's funny. I changed gyms probably a little bit later than you did. I think I started there the first week of September. Yeah. So I changed gyms too, and that was one thing that really was important for me. It was just like feeling welcome and feeling, because especially when you're like, I mean, I trained before. Like I started training I just did boxing. But I trained at an MMA gym and I started that like, gosh, I think that's been over 2 years now since I started there. And then I kind of took a break. And then before you know it, it had been like almost a year since I had trained. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta start training again. So I was like, I'm just
Right.
gonna start from scratch, start with a new gym. And I found a gym that was just like really welcoming and I just felt at home. So I definitely, yeah, I agree. It's so big. It makes a huge difference, especially, yeah, when you're
And
like
I
us,
feel
like
like
you.
it's also sort of circumstantial to a degree as well, because like, what was there like a specific reason that you switched gyms other than the fact that you had just like not gone back after a certain amount of time and you were like, yeah, I'm just gonna try something else? Was that kind of like,
Yeah, I kind of it wasn't necessarily there was any one reason why. I just kind of felt like I wanted to just start from scratch
yeah,
with my training, and I there were a few different gyms that I was considering going to, and so I kind of just looked at like the pros and cons of each gym and talked to other people too of like, "Hey, what gym do you think would be a good fit for me?" Cuz like even the gym I was training at before was honestly one of the best gyms in the Midwest, but I just felt like there was something that might be a better fit for me personally.
yeah, I hear you.
And because everybody has their own learning style and everybody
Right.
has like their own way of wanting to do things. So, and just having a little bit more like structure, I think was important for me. And so going to a smaller gym this time that was kind of one thing that I was like, okay, maybe going to a smaller gym will be, um, I guess a better fit for me, just with like getting a little bit more attention and, yeah, because
I
I
feel
don't
you.
know, I like
No, I
to
hear you.
get feedback and I like to train with the same people, regularly. So yeah, but yeah, it was like they were both great gyms. It's just a little bit of a different vibe. Um,
Yeah, no,
which
see, it was a little different for me just because I found Spencer's gym, luckily, just because it was in the neighboring town to my college town. So I was like at one point during COVID, like really overweight, and I started working out to just to lose weight. And it got to the point where I got like tired of going to the gym and like lifting and then doing cardio. So I wanted to try something else. And that's what kind of drew me to his gym.
yeah.
But the thing is, I moved out of my college town just because it's time to move past that stage in your life and, enter the real world.
Yeah.
And that is a 3 hour drive from where I grew up, which is where I moved back to. And luckily, Carolina Combat's only like 25 minutes from where I'm from originally. So it worked out really well. And on top of that, Spencer's gym was a smaller gym. It was a lot more like intimate, and it helped me kind of get that understanding initially because you can get that direct hands-on attention, and then it allowed me to understand that and interpret that, and now I can like transition into a gym where there's a lot more people, so you can get direct attention and instruction, but it may not be as frequent, and I was okay with that.
Right.
It helped a lot. It just helps a lot with development. And I'm there's so many other people at Carolina Combat who deserve attention and praise over me. That's without a doubt, because there's so many people that train there who and also fight who are workhorses. It's admirable. It's motivating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big thing too, is like the people that you're training with, like how seriously are they taking this? Like are they even if they're not competing, like I think it's still important when you go to the gym to take it as seriously as possible and try to learn something every single class. Like that's
100%.
one thing even if it's something small, I'm like I want to take away something from each class and then, kind of ponder on it until my next class, and then think, okay, what's something I could improve that, maybe I messed up last time, or maybe, just like trying to be intentional about my training. And I think it's
Yeah.
important to have people in your class that, they are really wanting to get better. And even if you suck right now, it's like, well, at least you're trying to get better and you're not just like
Just have a
accepting that
purpose.
you
That's
suck.
all it is. Just have a purpose behind it. There's no reason for just going through the motions with anything.
Yeah.
And especially training a combat sport because you'll get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah, I haven't sparred in a while. It's been probably a year and a half since I've sparred, I think. Maybe less than
I
that.
feel like I
Maybe less
spar.
than that.
In that
But
case, I probably spar way too much.
yeah, well,
Nah, I
I
don't know.
I was only sparring like once or twice a week, like twice a week at the most. And it was like maybe once a month I would do twice a week. But I was sparring, yeah, once a week for a while. And yeah, like after a while like of doing it consistently, you are kind of like, okay, maybe I should take a
You
break
just
for
got
a
to tone
second.
it down. You got to know the pace to which at which you can spar and keep going. That's a big thing. A lot of people, especially back then with MMA, they would spar way too hard. Like each spar would essentially be a fight in and of itself. And a lot of gyms and just the sport as a whole has kind of evolved as a more like tactical and methodical approach to the sport, which is what helps it be more of a sport.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad to see that a lot of gyms and fighters in general are kind of like trying to be a little bit smarter about their training. And there is still like some good stuff. I think having a good balance of old school and new school in your training,
Oh
I think
yeah,
is good.
it's blood sport at the end of the day. So you got to
Yeah.
know, you got to understand what you may feel.
Yeah, you got to develop your toughness, your mental and physical toughness too,
100%.
which that's hard. That can
100%.
be hard. I remember my first sparring session. I was like so scared. I was like, I thought I was gonna get knocked out or something. Like my
Oh
I
man.
was like, I don't know what to expect. I've never been punched in the face before. Like I had never been in a fight in my life. So I was like, I don't know what to expect, but it was really fun. And even though I did kind of get my ass kicked a little bit, I still enjoyed it. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that again. Like I feel like I learned faster from sparring because it was like I would take everything that I learned in the drill and then try to, apply it to sparring that week. But
To the best of your
um
ability, because there's a lot of little nuances and things like that you'll do in sparring kind of just like natural instinct that you
yes,
won't realize
exactly.
that'll be like deficient in like a competition scenario. That's that, and I fall victim to that to this day. And I mean, I've only been training for a minimal amount of time, so I try so hard to kind of recognize that and just work off of it, but it's just so difficult to get into your own head about that. It's a long
It
journey. The
is.
martial arts journey as a whole, it should be never ending.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I love about it because I'm the type of person who like I always need like a challenge. I always need something that I'm kind of chasing or something that I'm learning. So to me martial arts is perfect because it's like okay, once I even like learn boxing, for a while, then it's like okay, well then now I can move on and learn wrestling and I can do both at the same time and
Yep.
I can add jiu-jitsu or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like there's always another challenge. You can always get better. Like there's never gonna be anybody who's like a fourth degree jujitsu black belt and they're a taekwondo black belt and they're like a black belt. And I mean, there's maybe a few people out there, maybe,
Yeah. Those are
uh,
the type of
but not a
people
lot.
who live and breathe and sleep that
Yes.
grind lifestyle. And
Yes.
that's admirable in and of itself because they're masters of their craft.
Oh yeah. Well, and it just takes so much time to master something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or any martial arts. But I don't know. What's your favorite, I guess, martial art to train or favorite style like boxing, kickboxing, or Muay Thai, or what's your favorite to
I
train?
I really I enjoy kickboxing, but the thing is, I really just enjoy the blend of MMA as a whole. Like I love how there's always something that you can work off of that you can like pluck from a specific discipline to counterbalance something from another discipline. Like there's jujitsu sweeps that can counterbalance the strong hips of a wrestler, right? There's there's boxing counters that will work in boxing, but could lead you to getting hurt in MMA. So
Yeah.
that's part of the reason I was always so compelled to MMA as a whole. But boxing was my first like love in terms of combat sports as a whole.
Yeah, same here. Like I haven't really dabbled much into anything besides boxing just cuz like I'm the type of person where if I like start something and then kind of get decent at it, then I can throw something else on top of it and kind of once I get in a flow. So I try not to do too many things at once cuz my brain is just
Right. And
that's
that's part of the reason that I'm glad that I joined Carolina Combat, because they have a system, and it's just
oh, that's good.
um yeah, you can just sort of accept the structure and just entrench yourself in the system and slowly build your game off of what they teach you. And it's a slow burn process, but it's a very trusting process.
That's awesome. Yeah, well in uh Brian Battle trains out of Carolina Combat, I know.
Yep.
How do you
There's a
feel about his rise kind of? I guess you've gotten to see a tad bit of it.
Yeah, so it's funny. I it's so odd because I grew up in like a surrounding area to Brian, and seeing like his fight against Takashi Sato obviously is like what sort of put him on the map as a serious threat in the UFC. And when he was being introduced and it said fighting out of Charlotte, North Carolina, it just threw me for such a loop because I've lived here since I was 6. And I was
Yeah.
like, and mind you, this is just last year. So I was also entrenched in that lifestyle of training. So I was kind of intrigued. And once I moved home and like kind of got to introduce myself and just got to be around Brian, he's such an easygoing guy and he's so hardworking. I've never when he represents Charlotte like no other, because the way that he trains is at a world class level and he does it within that city, and that is incredible.
Yeah, his last performance too was I mean, really his last few have been incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool to kind of see him start to really pop. He had a nice little pop from that last I guess really the post fight interview. That
Yeah.
was pretty funny. I mean, obviously the performance kind of spoke for itself, but then I don't know. I saw all kinds of different videos and memes and stuff being shared with the you know
Oh
what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Of course, of course, of course. And when he says it at the gym, I just smile because it's a part of him. It's something that you just got to embrace and admire. Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, he's beating people. He's
Yeah,
doing his
exactly.
job, and
Mm-hmm.
he's finishing people for the first time. First person to knock out Gabe Green. First person to finish AJ Fletcher in the UFC. First person to finish Takashi Sato like that in the UFC. And he's just slowly working his way up. The plus a lot of people overlook just how difficult the competition is in the Ultimate Fighter. You know, like that's a gauntlet essentially.
Yeah.
And he did it. And he was the most overlooked guy on that show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see. I'm excited to see his next fight. I'm assuming he'll probably hopefully get a big fight next.
He's
Um,
looking for it. He's looking for it.
or at least a big
There's
name.
nothing. There's nothing in the works at the moment, though.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
trying to like be his source, but like I was at the gym last night, and that's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And you know, of course, he just fought, so it's like he doesn't really necessarily need to get back in the right this second,
Yeah, not right this second.
um but yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely excited to see his growth and just where his career takes him. It's fun. I always tell people, I'm like, you got to watch these fighters like when they first come up, because when they actually make it, it's just such a different experience watching it because you're like,
Oh
I
yeah,
remember when that guy was on like the early prelims. Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember when
He
that guy was on Contender Series, and then
yeah.
it's just crazy, and you just never know. And then a lot of times you have the other thing happen where they hype somebody up so much, and then they just never get to that like elite level.
Yeah,
And
they have those. They run into a wall a little bit. They run into that brick wall of an opponent essentially because everybody kind of meets their match at some point in their career.
yeah, yeah. Well,
But
speaking of,
on that note,
yeah,
I briefly just want to give a shout out to a couple of other guys out of
oh,
Carolina Combat
absolutely.
while we're on the topic of that gym because there's a couple of fighters that deserve some praise. Shamik Harvey, I just interviewed him this past weekend, and he's 6-1 as a pro. He's looking for any type of fight that will get him one step closer to the UFC. The UFC is just a step in the ladder of his goals to success, and he wants to be in the best in the world. Another person, Jonathan Martin, another promising prospect. He's the Aries Fight Series. You know Aries, they're the Tennessee-based regional organization.
Oh,
Aries
okay.
Fight Series, 155-pound champion. Works also looking to work his way into the UFC at some point. Just two guys who are ultra talented and train extra hard. Just want and one more, Josh Motzinger. He's fighting in Charlotte on November 4th at the Grady Cole Center for Fight For It. He's another guy who very skilled and just works his ass off in the gym.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the shout outs. Yeah, we got to show some love to our teammates and to,
Oh yeah, and there's so
up and
many
coming
more I can
fighters.
name too, man. Like there's so many. It's incredible. It's another part. That's another reason I just love going to that gym is because everybody's on their own little journey.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Yeah, well, I know you train there, but I saw on Instagram that you visited Extreme Couture,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw you had a picture with Eric Nixick. I thought that was really cool, especially with all
Yeah.
his success. I mean, he's got to
Oh
be
yeah.
in the running for
Especially
Coach
this
of the
year.
Year.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that was before everything that's happened since, right? So
Yeah,
it was
exactly. I
just
noticed that.
that's crazy that what has happened since with Strickland winning the title and obviously up until that point, that was the same week that there was a new heavyweight champion crowned, but he was the coach for the former champion Francis. So
Right.
like just being able to see how he kind of goes about his day and just his camaraderie with every person in that gym and the structure that his mentality brings to that gym, it was admirable. And it shows with how successful all of his fighters are, especially that Sean Strickland performance was, it was, I can't even describe it. There's no word to describe how just perfectly executed that was.
Yeah. Yeah, that it really was a perfectly kind of executed game plan. And but the funny thing is that like
It was
nobody
behind the
thought
mind
that
of
was the
Eric
game
Nixick
plan.
though. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it was because of Nixick's coaching. He's a
so
great
good.
coach.
Well, and even just his coaching in the cage too, like in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Little things that he says that
Yeah, like
just
calling out Izzy's bluffs was a big factor to that, to Sean winning that fight.
yeah. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, we're not going to make this a I mean, even though it ended up being
A
a
point
decision. He's
fight.
like, "Yeah, we're not going to make this
No,
a
but
point
yeah,
fest."
right.
But it really wasn't. I mean, Sean Strickland dominated
Yeah,
Adesanya on the
it
feet.
was yeah, it was a very one-sided fight.
And he didn't get hit hardly at all.
That
It's
the
nuts.
knockdown in that first round sort of set the tone for the rest of the fight.
It did. It really did because we were like, okay, we didn't expect Sean to really have much for Adesanya on the feet. Like,
That's what we thought.
and yeah, and we were so wrong. And you just never know. It's like different
That's why
styles.
this
It's
sport is so
crazy,
great. Like
isn't it?
when I was in Vegas, I went to and I was at 285. I mean, I should have expected something spectacular out of John Jones, but him submitting Cyril Gahn in
Yeah.
a minute or two was my jaw dropped the moment it happened. I was
Yeah.
sitting there, sitting in the stands. It wasn't the nosebleeds, which is kind of nice, but like when you see moments like that happen in sport
Yeah, that's
history,
wild.
it's captivating in a way that you can't describe. You just got to be able to experience it. And it crowned him as double champ. He's another double champ. He's not a simultaneous double champ, but a double champ nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how realistic that would have been for him to even try to be a simultaneous double champ, just because of the
The
difference
weight
in those divisions
differential.
is
Yep.
huge.
Yep. The weight differential between light heavyweight and heavyweight is crazy.
Yeah, and just he fought on such a high level at light heavyweight. I mean, he ran through everybody, and then at heavyweight to fight, yeah, he didn't fight Francis, but he fought arguably one of the most skilled guys in that division. And honestly, stand up wise, has probably more technical skill than Francis, but Francis is just such a unit. Like
Yeah.
he's just
He's a force.
destroys everything in his path. Like,
Yeah, he's a force.
yeah,
He's a brick wall.
yeah. And sometimes that's really, what makes a difference for a fighter is just their power, their
That
physicality, and just
physicality. Yep.
yeah,
It
it's
really is a
crazy.
big difference maker. It's an overlooked factor, especially at the higher weights, especially at
Yeah.
the higher weight classes.
Yeah, well, and that's another example of Eric Nixick's work. I mean, look at Francis before he started training at Extreme Couture, and look at him now. Like, everybody thought that Stipe was going to give him problems in their last fight,
Mm-hmm.
and then even the Cyril Gane fight, everybody was like, oh, there's no way he's going to be able to handle Cyril's speed and whatever. And I didn't really worry about Francis in that fight. I don't know. But
Well, yeah, it's because the exchanges on the feet in that fight weren't like they weren't blunt force the way like
right.
Francis normally dictates it to be. Like if it's on Francis's terms, it's gonna be a lot more physical. It was a point fight up until the point that the grappling exchanges began.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun fight.
It was.
I thought that he had improved his wrestling a lot. I thought
Yeah.
that was one thing that was stuck out to me. Um and it's got to be hard to find training partners for heavyweights
Oh
that
yeah, that
are
are good wrestlers
wrestlers,
and are that size. Yeah,
even at
without
light
a doubt.
heavyweight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's one thing, that makes a big difference is especially at the heavier weight classes is like having people to train with that can mimic, your opponents. It gets harder when you're in certain divisions where they just don't have as much talent.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah,
Big
I'm really
factor.
excited. I'm excited to see what happens with this Fury and Ngannou fight. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's kind of sneaking up on us too. It's sneaking up.
I keep forgetting about it, and Tyson already booked another fight, I think, for like December or January
Yeah,
or
against
something.
Usyk and
Which is just so funny because he's just like, yeah, Francis isn't gonna do anything to
I
me.
know it's disrespectful if at the end of the day, no
It's
matter how
so
you look
funny.
at it. Yeah, it's funny, but it's disrespectful.
I know, because it's like, well, I mean, boxing isn't as much of a you never know kind of sport
Yeah,
as much
boxing's
as
one of
MMA.
those. Mm-hmm,
So that's the
exactly.
only thing. It's like the skill does play a huge factor, like in boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that, MMA fighters don't have the best track record in boxing, but it's like, okay, well, let's see some boxers come to MMA and see how they do. Like,
Yeah, that the thing there's layers to mixed martial arts. The
yes,
boxing is a one-dimensional combat sport, and that's why the guys that entrench themselves in that sport just specifically are so good because they take
yep,
years to develop their abilities to cater that discipline. When you're in MMA,
exactly.
you're trying to master something that has really no masterfulness to it. To quote Shamik, because that's what Shamik Harvey said when I interviewed him this past weekend. He said the thing about MMA is that you're trying to master something that's not masterful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's hard. But yeah, I feel like you can master boxing. I feel like
Yep.
you can.
Yeah. Look at
I mean
Floyd.
it's hard. You have to really dedicate your life to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be done. It can be done. And man, it's like watching Canelo too, his last fight. I love watching Canelo.
Yeah,
He's
that
so fun
was
to watch.
I love watching Canelo too. It's his development over the years, his maturity, seeing him mature in the fight game is awesome. And I wish Charlo would have came at him with a little bit more intent than he did, just because like I
Yeah.
said this in one of my past videos, but like the version of Charlo that was in there against Brian Castano, that was his most previous opponent, compared to the version that was in there against Canelo, it was two different fighters. There was a
Yeah,
lot more
and I wonder if
ferocity.
just being, in there with Canelo, like, is that enough? Like, I would imagine that being so intimidating. Like,
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's like you hit him hard, he's going to hit you incredibly
yeah.
hard and probably twice as quick.
Yeah, he's so fast.
Yeah.
And he
And
throws just like random stuff, like he throws to the arm a lot and the shoulder.
mhm,
And
mhm.
yeah, he's very unique.
That
And the
overhand
way he
that
moves
he
his head
knocked,
too.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. He can weave into shots really well, and like the overhand that caused the knockdown. A lot of people were like, "Oh, he faked the knockdown." It was like, bro, no, he got hit on the temple, and then tried to scoot out of the way, and his legs weren't good, and he ate an
Yeah.
uppercut trying to duck under, and then he took a knee. It was a tactical move.
So circling back to MMA, what do you think about this weekend's main event? Yusuf versus Barboza.
I think. Thank you for asking that. I think that the experience factor is going to play a lot in the favor of Edson just because of how many world class guys, former champions he's fought, and or former title challengers, however you want to look at it. And for Sadiq Yusuf, this is kind of like his chance to propel himself to the top 10 because the thing is though, he doesn't have that style that has given Barboza the most problems, right? Like
Right.
the guys that have given Edson the most problems are the dominant grapplers, the
Yeah.
smothering top heavy grapplers like Khabib and Bryce Mitchell. Those were the fights that you kind of remember Edson being the most neutralized in. And Sadiq is primarily a striker, and you try to fight fire with fire. I just your chances aren't always that great. But look at
Yeah.
how Barboza versus Giga wound up going.
Yeah. I am curious to see, just with Barboza being so much more experienced, and Yusuf is good, but it's a big jump
Mm-hmm.
in competition. It's a big jump, and sometimes that's the only way to really like measure where someone's at, especially if they're like got a lot of hype
Well, granted, he
and
also has fought Arnold Allen. Sadiq Yusuf
yeah,
has, and Arnold Allen is in the top 5 right now. So
right.
it better time now than never if you really think about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I will be a little surprised if Yusuf wins, just because I've been watching Barboza for so long and I'm like, he's just, yeah, I
And
don't know.
recency bias in MMA is crazy.
Oh yeah.
And when you take into consideration Barboza's last fight, it was vintage Edson Barboza in 2023 with that knee knockout over Billy
Yeah.
Quarantillo. So, you know, shrugging my shoulders at that one.
Yeah, I
That's
have
why
no
I would
idea who
favor
to pick on
Edson.
that fight. Yeah, I would probably favor Edson too. But it's like, yeah, you never know. You never know, especially when they get later in their careers too. It's just
Yeah.
like you never know if like their chin is still gonna be there
Yeah,
or
and the young
yeah.
hungry lions are always like that's real in this sport. When you got a young hungry lion and they're in front of you and they're coming after you, and you have nothing left to give or you have nothing for them,
Yeah.
you can get taken out. Like I said, that was similar to the Giga versus Edson situation. So but I don't know. Edson seems like he's not, I don't want to say reformed, but kind of just adjusted his game to
I
more,
agree.
like he's going based off who he's fighting now rather than going into every fight with the same approach.
Yeah. I agree. I like Edson Barboza in this fight. I'm hoping he win. I mean, I don't know who I would hope wins, but I always like to
Right.
see him win just because he's such a vet. So
Right.
it's like
I
hard
don't
not to root for him.
necessarily hope
But
for
I'm not
anybody
rooting
to win.
against Sadiq necessarily.
Yeah, that's why I say I don't hope necessarily for anyone to win. I just
Yeah.
take all the factors going into it and then like choose which one I think is more like beneficiary.
Yeah, it's just hard to bet against Barbosa, but
It
we'll
is.
see. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting. There's been a lot of news in MMA
Mhm.
the last pretty much 48 hours.
Oh yeah.
So the first thing that happened, and there's like three different things I want to make sure we hit on because there's a lot.
Yeah.
But the first thing was um Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. So Oliveira pulls out of the fight because he has a
Yeah.
cut. He got cut in
Yep.
sparring. Um, so now can't fight Islam Makhachev in Abu Dhabi in
Mhm.
October on the 21st. And then we hear all kinds of crazy rumors going around. And then we hear Volkanovski's going to fight him. And we're like, what?
Out of
What is going
nowhere.
on?
The UFC called his team and you know them, they stay ready so they don't have to get ready. And that's why they're at the position that they're in.
Yep. Yeah, well, and they had Gamrot as the backup too.
Yeah,
And
but
they
here's the thing
had,
with
but
Gamrot.
nobody
I don't
wants to see that fight. That's the thing, I think.
well,
On a
no,
pay per
that's
view, on a pay per view, a
I'm not
big
yeah,
pay per
you're not
view.
trying to I'm not trying to like, step on Gamrot's reputation
No,
at this point because
he
he's a
deserves it, I
great
think.
fighter. Yeah.
Yeah,
But the thing is, his last win against Rafael Fiziev, it was because of an injury.
yeah,
And the fight before that against Jalen Turner was a very competitive fight.
yep.
So I feel like there's still another fight left in Gamrot
I agree.
in his career before he can like elevate himself to title contention.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe they'll get him a fight on that card. I guess
Yeah, that's
I
not a
don't
bad
know.
idea. That's not a bad idea.
I don't know who he would fight.
Yeah, because you
Um,
can't just bring in somebody that's going to make their debut against him and then be like, oh, he beat this guy. Now he's justified in getting a title shot. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in most of that division trains at American Top Team too. So it's
Mhm.
like there's not a lot of like Dustin Poirier, they called him, I believe they called him and offered him the Islam fight, and he said yes. So like he's down to fight, but he can't fight Gamrot because they both train at ATT.
Yeah.
And
They'd push
then
Gamrot out of that gym before they pushed Dustin out, though,
oh yeah,
if
yeah.
they had to fight each other.
Yeah, yeah. So it's crazy. And but I don't know, maybe they'll make, who knows? I mean, we just saw all kinds of crazy stuff happen. So
Yeah.
getting back to that opponent change, what do you think about the 10 days notice
Yeah.
Volkanovski going against Islam Makhachev for the
Well,
second time?
I think the fact that Volk's taking it on short notice is playing against him for one thing. I think the fact that he doesn't have to cut down to 145 could be good or bad. It just depends on how good a shape Volk is in.
Yeah.
And if we know him for his preparation in general, like he's a workhorse. So
Yes.
it's a matter of
I
how
honestly think
yeah.
he's been preparing for this.
Oh
I
yeah.
honestly do.
Yeah, under the radar type deal.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel
I
that.
do.
I that's not a crazy speculation because at the end of the day, he didn't have anything. They booked the Topuria fight literally like last night or 2 days ago, however long
I
ago.
know.
And then this happened. But there's a lot of factors. Like how good of a game plan can his team come up with in 10 days? How good a shape
Right.
can they how ready can they get him in 10 days? Because Islam has had a full camp. Granted, he's prepared for a different opponent, but he's had a full camp. He's peaked.
Yeah. I do wonder yeah, has Volkanovski been training for this? Because I know he wanted this fight. Like I know this was probably the fight he wanted the most.
Yeah. He
So
wants
I
to avenge his
figured,
loss.
yeah, well, and I figured that he'd probably be thinking that there's a possibility Charles could pull out of this fight.
True. True.
Especially with Charles previously saying that he wasn't going to be ready, but that was before Volkanovski beat Yair.
Right.
So I think Charles took the fight to avoid Volkanovski being able to take it. I
That's not
think that's why.
ridiculous.
And these are just conspiracy theories, of course, but these are
That's
my
not
conspiracy
ridiculous
theories.
though. No,
But
that makes sense.
yeah, it's gonna be interesting though, because yeah, it is on short notice, but I think that is gonna work in, I guess, away from Makashev's favor. I think
Game
that is a
plan wise,
disadvantage.
100%. Game plan wise,
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, because Charles is
yeah,
a completely different fighter than Volk. And the
for
thing about
sure.
Volk is he's always been the type of fighter to like say yes to any opportunity. And I think that that's worked in his favor because I think he's just a student of the game. I
Yeah,
think he's an assassin. I think he observes everything, he sees everything. So part of me does feel like he was sort of preparing for Islam, knowing that that rematch was a possibility in the near future. But preparing for like somebody like Ilya isn't similar. It's a lot less
yeah,
MMA based because Ilya is a heavy boxing MMA fighter.
yeah. Well, and I think they announce that fight for January.
It was supposed to be on a Canada card.
So I'm wondering if Volkanovski was like, okay, I'll start training for that fight once I know the Islam fight is no
Yeah.
option. I don't know. I'm really like,
It's weird. It's weird
he
how to
seems
like
like such a
factor in where
sneaky.
everybody. You think so? I think it's just positional. I
Yeah.
think it just depends on like what everybody's got going on, you know?
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting. I really like Volkanovski. I hope he wins, because that would just be really cool to see him a double
Well,
champ.
then we'd have to see the trilogy, and that'd be a
Yeah.
crazy trilogy
Oh
because
my god, I know. It'd be
the
huge.
fight in February was so competitive.
Yes. Yeah. I
Most
don't know
people that
how
fight
this one's
Islam
gonna
get
go.
finished. That's the
That's why
thing.
I'm wondering, is Islam gonna finish him this time? Like, I'm honestly, if I had to bet on it, I'd probably pick Islam. But
That's the safer pick for sure, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah, for sure. Even with the opponent change, yeah, I think there are more things to worry about with Charles for Islam.
Yeah,
Even though he did beat him much easier than he beat Volkanovski. But the thing is, I think that he knew he had to beat Charles as quickly as possible. Otherwise, there's just more risk. The longer you go in the fight with Charles, the more risk you're taking of getting caught
yeah.
in a submission or
It's a
something
firefight
crazy.
until the end, however long it
Yeah.
lasts. And the thing
Yeah.
that is overlooked about Volkanovski is he is incredibly good at picking up on patterns and capitalizing on them
Yes.
in the fight, during the
He
fight.
is.
And that's not something that Islam has been known to do. I mean, he capitalized on an opening against Charles, and he had his moments against Volk in the first fight, but he had a full camp to prepare for Volk and Volk's style. And Volk is, if he goes into that fight with the same mentality and approach that he had in the first one, who knows? I think the intrigue for this rematch is it could exceed the Charles versus Islam rematch, but it is an equalizer without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be so interesting. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I was really hoping for this fight in the first place. Because I want to see Charles and Islam rematch in Brazil, I think.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
more
know.
justified.
I think it's only fair at this
Like a
point. I
title
mean,
fight in your territory. Now I get an opportunity on my territory. It just makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I don't know. And I had a feeling Charles wasn't gonna end up making it. I just kind of had a feeling. And just because he had said he wasn't ready before, and and he's had issues before pulling out of fights. Not a ton, but it is what it is. I mean, so did Habib. Habib pulled out of so many fights. So
Yeah.
it happens, especially at that level. It
Yeah,
happens all the
it's a
time.
brutal sport. It's a brutal
Yeah,
sport in
it
preparation,
is.
especially.
Oh yeah, everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, you throw one little thing off at that level, and your whole game is thrown off. So,
But you have to make it
yeah,
as difficult for on yourself as possible so that when the fight comes, it's not nearly as much of a struggle when it gets
exactly.
difficult.
I think that is the biggest thing too about, well, really both Makachev and Volkanovski is just yeah, they're so dialed in, and they're always improving too. They're
Yeah,
always getting better. And I
yeah.
think that's the one thing I wonder, has Volkanovski improved more than Makhachev has? Because
He
Makhachev
fought
hasn't
Yair.
fought.
Yep.
Yeah, Makhachev hasn't fought since we saw Volkanovski and him fight the first time.
And
So we
momentum
don't
is
have.
a crazy thing in MMA.
It is, and well, and it can also be a bad thing. Like with Adesanya, like I think he was fighting too much in too many title fights, and
Well, and you got to
so
factor in like the mileage that the fights do to
yeah,
each person too. Like Volk isn't taking that much damage. Like the Izzy took
no,
some shots in his first fight against Pereira and
yeah,
then immediately turned around in April. He fought Pereira the first time in November of last year and then turned around in April, and then following that he gets clipped by Strickland and plays it safe and gets outpointed because of it. So
yeah,
I I think there was some lingering injuries surrounding Israel that he didn't really acknowledge or
yeah.
just talk about.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and a lot of times they don't want to take a break. They want
Yep.
to keep going and keep stacking up wins, and
Yeah.
yeah, it happens. They're
Yeah.
kind of run into a brick wall and they're like, "Okay, now I
A
actually
little
got
bit of
to take a
downtime.
break."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of middleweight, we have a new middleweight co-main event for
Oh yeah.
294,
Oh yeah.
which that was just announced today.
Yeah. It's so
Um
sudden. Who would have thought, right? The former dominant champion is going to move up to face a guy that was originally trying to chase him when he was champion. You know what I mean? Because they were both
yeah,
at 170 originally.
I know. I've always wanted to see Usman move up to 185. I've wanted to see this.
It's going to be interesting. It's not
Because
because
I
you're not
just
going to
think
have to
he
cut
cuts
as much weight,
so much weight. Yeah. He cuts so much weight. Like, what does he walk around at? Like two something?
like 215 probably, between
215.
205 and 215 probably.
Yeah,
That'd be
that's
my guess.
insane. Yeah, he's cutting a lot of weight, and he's getting older, and he's got injuries, and I mean he's had problems with his knees for a long time, and I just wonder like how much is that weight cut affecting him? Because like I know sometimes it's easier to get injured when you're cutting more weight, um, and then just like yeah, I mean all the wear and tear on his body. So I'm wondering if maybe not having to cut weight will kind of help him get back on track.
I feel like
Um,
there's a possibility for that. I think it's going to be a good beneficial factor for him going into that fight. I
yeah,
also just kind of think it was the right move at the right time, especially given the circumstances with Paulo Costa pulling out and Usman falling short to Leon twice. And especially now that Izzy is no longer champ at 185, that's another big thing to take into consideration because Kamaru had said that he was not going to move up in weight unless Izzy was no longer champ. So everything just kind of seems to be falling into place at the
I
perfect time.
know. It's
And a
crazy.
lot of people online want to be like, "Oh, this fight makes no sense for a middleweight title picture." Oh, blah blah blah. But it's like the difference in weight between 170 and 185 is not that significant to where these guys they can perform at a higher level, especially if they're depleting themselves down to
Yeah.
170 and then they move up. And that's what we're
Well, there's
seeing
been a
now.
lot of fighters that have moved from welterweight to middleweight and vice versa.
Yeah,
Moved
like Brian
down.
Battle's a great example of one of
Mm-hmm.
those guys.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a great move for Usman because I think the welterweight division is a lot more competitive than middleweight.
Mm-hmm.
And at least right now, I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at in the rankings, but I think that skill wise, with his wrestling alone, just has, I don't know, he brings something to the table at middleweight, I think. And it's gonna be tough just because yeah, the guys at middleweight are pretty big. But he's a
And
big
Chimaev,
welterweight.
but Chimaev is probably the toughest matchup he could have
Yeah,
possible. Like if
I know.
we're
I'm
being
leaning towards
realistic about
Hamzat
it,
on this one.
yeah, you have to just because he's younger, he has less wear and tear, he's a lot more explosive in scrambles,
Yeah.
and he doesn't necessarily concede a position the way we saw Camaro do against Leon. And
Yeah,
I just want to add one more thing. There's just a difference in like the pace at which those guys grapple in their
yeah,
fights. And
I
unless
agree.
Usman can completely neutralize that and make it a stand-up affair, I think it's going to be a tough fight for him.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's a tough fight on the ground and on the feet for him because in Usman's stand up has improved a lot. I will say that. I
100%.
mean, he looked
His
fantastic when he
striking
was
development
fighting.
is probably the best in MMA up to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because his last few wins really were more to do with his striking
Yeah,
than his wrestling. But in a lot of that probably too is like, okay, well, all this wrestling is gonna be really hard on my body. So let me focus more on striking and then kind of changes his game up a little bit. But at the same time, yeah, Hamzat's style, I feel like it's just difficult to deal with in general. Even for Paulo Costa, I was leaning towards Hamzat in that fight.
really.
Um,
I thought
yeah,
Paulo could have given him a very good test because
I
if you
think it
think
would have
about it,
probably been a tough fight, but I was kind of leaning toward Hamza just because he's so aggressive
yeah.
and yeah, I think I don't know if that fight would have gone to the ground because Paulo Costa is hard to take down.
And he's
Um,
underrated when it gets to the ground.
yes, he
If
is.
you watch his
He
fight with
is.
Rockhold, you'll know like Rockhold is not a slouch when it comes to grappling. And on top of that, that fight was at altitude, and they both
Yeah,
still neutralized, like basically stalled each other out on the ground.
yeah, yeah. Paulo's good. He's good. But
It
yeah, I
just
mean, is
sucks that he
anybody
had this shit with
surprised?
his elbow. Yeah, it just sucks. It's always something with him.
Yeah, do you think he's gonna? What kind of fight do you think he's gonna get after this? I mean, with him pulling out again,
I really don't know.
it's gonna
I
be
have no
tough.
idea like what the UFC could do with him at this point because
Yeah,
he was originally supposed to fight wasn't he supposed to fight somebody else before Hamzat or no?
yeah. He wasn't he supposed to fight Aliskarov?
Yeah, he was supposed to fight Ikram Aliskerov and then
There was
but
another one
there
too,
was no
wasn't there?
reason, yeah, but there was no reason for that fight to be canceled. So I feel
Yeah,
like I don't know. I think he's just unlucky. Like it's not like he's
yeah,
not preparing properly for these fights. He's obviously
yeah.
training insanely hard if he's got a staph infection on his elbow.
Right.
It's just unlucky.
Yeah, yeah. That sucks. Yeah, there's been a lot of that. I feel like. I mean, that's kind of. I guess Darren Till's a little bit different. But he had
Well,
kind
he's
of
had
just.
knee problems, which is
Yeah,
way
he's.
more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. That was tough.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
hate
and that
that
kind of
for him.
really ended his UFC career pretty much. Was that from the Robert Whitaker fight when he got hit with that oblique kick? Is that kind of what started it? I can't remember.
Um,
Or did he have
what was
I
his
feel
fight
like he had
before
a
that?
problem before though.
Yeah, well, there's a possibility. I think he had knee
Did
problems
you hear he
before
got
that.
sued for like over $1 million for Raw Dog?
Yes, I did see that. I saw a clip of that and I was like, dang, man, I can't even imagine being in a position like that where you owe someone $1 million.
Dude, I know. I wonder if
Hell
he's gonna
no.
fight Mike Perry. Maybe that's how he plans to pay them back.
Mike Perry's been dropping Darren Till's name, so I mean, there's always a possibility. You know, Mike Perry's down to scrap anybody.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's a dog. Yeah. Speaking of bare knuckle, we've got Keith Richardson's fights coming up October 20th.
Yes. Everybody at the gym at Carolina Combat is trying to talk about and like arrange how they're gonna be able to like train on Saturday and then or train Friday because it's on a Friday because it's the 20th
Right.
and then 294 is the 21st. So they gotta like get everything done, get to Greenville, and then there's guys who have fights in freaking like Virginia at Carolina Combat that have to weigh in.
Right.
So they got to go to Virginia and then go all the way to South Carolina to try and make it to Keith's fight. But I mean, listen, Keith is so underrated,
I know.
so underrated, and I mean, I think he's getting this opportunity at the perfect time.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I didn't really know who he was until his last fight with Perez, because I didn't really get into BKFC. Like, I had watched it a few times before. Like, I watched a Mike Perry fight, and I watched like Julian Lane, and whenever like that fight was really hyped. So I had like tune into it when I saw something that like caught my attention.
Right.
But it wasn't until this year that I started like really following it regularly, like actually paying attention to like different fighters. And now they got like the Prospect series, which is really cool.
That was my
Um,
thing too, was like I had watched it previously and didn't pay attention to names, and then
yeah,
slowly but gradually I kind of realized like Keith Peterson specifically, or not Keith Richardson specifically, that he is territorialized in Charlotte, and like he has, if you look at his MMA record too, like
yeah,
he fought Patchy Mix
I know.
before Patchy Mix was in Bellator. That's
I know.
insane. That is nuts.
Well, he has a win over Blackshear too, who's
Hmm.
kind of starting to make his rise a little bit. I mean, he lost
Yeah.
his last fight, but it was on like 5 days
Yeah.
notice. And
And Bautista's about to fight somebody ranked. I think
yeah,
he actually just had a fight booked.
yeah, he's got, his resume is crazy. And then he was in the military, he was in the Marines before that too. And it's just like, man, talk about impressive. And if he wins this title, it's like, dude, you're the GOAT.
Nah,
That's
seriously.
so funny.
He
But
he he's
yeah,
he's a beast,
he's
man.
awesome.
His hand,
Yeah.
nobody thought he had hands like that, and then he just started dropping fools, and everybody had to look out.
Yeah, well, he had a lot of submissions in his MMA career. He
That's
wasn't
right,
really like a knockout artist. He was more of a
right,
submission guy. And then you see him in the ring and you're like, "What?"
right.
Yeah, he's so good. So good. Yeah, just another fighter that I feel like has found like kind of like Mike Perry, like really found like his thing. Like I feel like
It's his niche.
BKFC is, yeah, he's built for that for sure.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
and it shows with his style, because there's certain guys that go into that and like that they'll take one shot and like you'll see the blood, but they'll just go
Yep.
down and concede. Other guys, they'll take a shot and they'll keep going, and that's what makes or breaks guys, and especially in bare knuckle. Bare knuckle's no joke.
No.
Nobody likes getting hit with a bony limb, man.
No.
The guys that are built for it are just different.
They are. Yeah, that's what I always tell people. I'm like, dude, you gotta watch BKFC. I'm like, even I mean, like some people, I'm like, okay, if you don't like violence, like don't watch it. You might not like it. But I'm like, if you can handle, you're not super squeamish. I'm like, you gotta watch it because these fighters are just a different type of fighter. Like I can't even explain it. It's like they're just dogs. Like they're different. They have a different mentality. Like they're just nuts. And I love watching it. Like, cause I don't know. It's something about people like that just like they just are willing to do anything. Like it just seems like they're unbreakable. Like
Right. They have
I
a
love
will that
watching
goes
that.
beyond themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it surpasses them. And
Yeah.
there's an art to bare knuckle too, because I don't know if I think Mike Perry said this, but he mentioned how when you're fighting bare knuckle, you have to like remain tense but technical at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're fighting in MMA, you kind of breathe when you strike every time you kind of exhale, and you have to like be able to be tensed up in bare knuckle, because like you don't have any padding or anything to deflect or any, it's all bare skin on skin, and it's just a whole
Yeah.
nother factor that people don't really think about unless like you've either picked the brain of somebody that's done it or you've done it yourself. I mean, I haven't done it myself. Shit.
Yeah. I don't know if I could do it.
No, I don't think I
Like,
could either.
man, that's
That's just intense.
that's
It's
just,
super
yeah.
intense.
Yeah. And just like getting cut like that too. Like a lot of times it doesn't take much in bare
Nah,
knuckle.
blood's not that bad. The thing is when you get hit with a like bare skin and it slices you, it cuts
Yeah.
deep, and those cuts, those
Yeah.
sting.
Yeah.
There's a difference
Yeah.
between
It's
a little surface
intense.
abrasion and a deep gash caused by a knuckle bone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh my God. That's crazy. Yeah. I don't know how they do it. I don't know. It makes sense though that like somebody like Keith Richardson does it because he's just a monster. Um, yeah. What a cool guy. Yeah. They just, yeah, all the BKFC fighters are pretty cool to watch. It's fun.
I need to
Uh,
try and maybe interview him at some point and like go because he has a gym in Charlotte. He has Modern Warrior. I think
yeah,
that's
I
his
had him
gym. So
on like a few weeks ago.
I might
Yeah,
have
he's
to go
awesome.
and have a little
He's really fun to talk
conversation with him
to.
because I know also Brian works with him whenever Brian's
Mm-hmm.
in fight camp. He always goes and gets working with Keith.
Yeah, he's got those hands.
I
Yeah,
put you to
yeah,
sleep.
yeah. You should definitely have him on. He's cool. Yeah, but so getting back to MMA, I wanted to ask you kind of what your thoughts are on who do you think well, first of all, who's your favorite fighter? And then who do you think is the greatest fighter of all time? Curious to see what you think.
So favorite fighter is just difficult because you can draw certain things from each fighter. But if I had to like draw it down to two, it'd probably I'll say Brian Battle just because he's I mean, what he's done so far in his career is impressive. But like since I actually became a fan of the sport, I'd say Vicente Luque.
Oh, I love Luque.
He's the
He's
man.
he's about to fight
He's fighting Ian Gary.
yes. That's a big step up for Ian Gary. Man.
I agree. It's Ian Gary's also somebody that Brian is not very fond of.
I don't know what to think of Ian Gary because it's like I mean, he did dominate Neil Magny, and I wasn't expecting him to get through Neil Magny because Neil Magny's so good. Um, but at the same time, I mean, he really hurt Neil Magny's legs like pretty quickly in that fight,
Yeah,
and
yeah. He he
Neil
he
was
exploited
basically on
that.
one leg.
Yeah, he exploited the fact that Neil Magny has like his stance just doesn't allow him to check kicks.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you
I
can't
didn't
check
think
kicks,
about that going into that fight. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, that's a smart game plan.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
but yeah, I
He's
don't
a
know what
smart
to think.
fighter.
Yeah, he's good. He's good. I don't know what to think. I feel like he's gonna have to grow on me for sure.
He's
His
not
personality.
he's definitely not doing himself any favors when he gets that microphone in front of him. I
Yeah.
mean, and who am I to judge, right? Like I'm I'm nobody essentially, but point
Yeah, I'm
being,
not a fighter, so
I've been in attendance. I was at 285. He fought Song Kanon on that card.
oh yeah.
I saw that fight and I saw him, get hurt and have to rally back and get a finish, and it was impressive. And then I was at the Charlotte card in May where he fought D Rod, and that was a very impressive finish too. But Brian's finish was more impressive because he did it against a guy that Ian couldn't finish.
Right.
There's so many
Yeah,
circumstances and factors that go into MMA. That's why this sport is incredible.
definitely. Yeah, I feel like Vicente Luque. I mean, I said the same thing about Neil Magny, but Vicente Luque's I feel like definitely a step above Neil Magny for sure.
And Luke
He's
is
so
just he's a blood
talented.
and guts warrior too. That's the thing. He's a blood and guts warrior and he's technical. I just don't like the whole brain bleed thing. That
That's
concerns
what I
me.
was gonna say. I was gonna say the
Yeah, I
same
don't like
thing.
that.
Yeah, that is definitely scary. And not that I don't think Luque can beat Ian Gary, but it's just like you never know in this sport. You know, people get caught
Mhm,
with head kicks. Like I didn't think
mhm.
Dustin Poirier was gonna get knocked out by Gaethje with a head kick like
Right.
that. Like, that's the one thing I do worry about is if Ian Gary throws a head kick and it lands in the right spot. It's just like I
Right.
don't want to see it's really more not even like for his career, just his health in general. Like I don't want to
Mhm,
see anything bad happen to him
mhm.
or him have negative consequences later in his life because of it.
Right.
And I know he's a dog. Like obviously he's he's not gonna
Dude,
quit
he's
until he
such a
has
dog.
to.
That's the thing. Like he's one of those guys
Yeah.
who's too tough for his own good.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So unless he
I
comes
know a lot
correct
of people like
against
that.
Ian
Yeah.
Gary and gets a finish, I don't know how I feel. I don't
I
know.
know. I agree. I'm in the same boat. I'm
And
surprised
him
he's even
being
fighting again.
him being my favorite fighter, it's why I kind of worry when
Yeah.
I heard that fight was booked. But if we
Yeah.
want to transition to my GOAT of MMA,
Yeah.
oh man, it's so difficult to like
I know.
decipher. I'd probably just go with the safe pick and say George St. Pierre because like he was able to exploit something of his opponents in every fight, and he was in a ton of title fights that were very like telling
He
fights,
fought
trial
very
fights.
tough competition too. Like
Exactly.
he fought the best of the best, like his half of his career.
And
Like,
like I also could say John Jones because but there's just out exterior factors that you got to
yeah.
consider. So clean
Yeah, I have like a top
GSP.
three. It's like Anderson Silva, GSP, John Jones in no particular order. Just those three, I think, are my.
I like mentioning Silva. It's just hard to because a lot of
The
people
ladder of
that
his
got into
career
this,
was tough.
yeah, a lot of people
Yeah,
that got into the sport recently don't realize
I
how
know.
dangerous he was. I'll never forget. I
In
was
the win streak, he was
um
in the just the amount of title fights and
Yeah,
his
I
win
was
streak.
10 years old when he was in the rivalry with Chael, right? And my uncles who were diehard MMA fans, they were part of the reason that I got into MMA. They came and visit the weekend of the Chael Anderson fight. And I watched that fight from start to finish on the edge of my seat, just so confused, but so intrigued because all I knew was Anderson Silva was the man, and he
Oh
got
yeah.
worked that whole fight up until that very last moment where he submitted him. And I was just, oh man, that was like, how you have little moments where you fall in love with the sport? Like that was one
Yep.
of them. I've had so many of them over the
Oh,
course
I
of my
know.
life, but that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and it's funny because like even though I'm I guess a newer MMA fan, like I got into MMA, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago is when I really started to watch it, pay attention to it. And then it was like during COVID, I feel like is when I kind of got like upset, like die hard, became
Right.
like a die hard fan. Like I
What
was a
was the
casual
COVID
fan
fight?
before.
What was the COVID fight for you that like really just drew you or pulled you in
So
entirely?
it was definitely before COVID that I kind of I guess got more obsessed with it. And it was the Namajunas title fight. I can't remember if it was the first or the second one with Joanna.
Andrade.
I think it
You're talking
was,
about the Joanna fight. Okay.
or maybe, man, I can't remember which fight it was, but it was one of Rose's title fights. Um and I fell in love with it really at that moment more because I could kind of relate to the sport more.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back and watched like her on The Ultimate Fighter. I watched that whole season
Mm-hmm.
and just like kind of fell in love with Rose. So I had a little phase where I was like I more paid attention to the women's MMA.
Right.
And I watched a lot of like Rose's old fights and watched a lot of the female fighters. And then it was, I guess, during COVID there wasn't anything else to really do, so I just really dove into the sport like more. And that's when I went back and watched a bunch of the old fights. And
Mm.
I watched a ton of Anderson Silva's fights. And I was just upset. I was so fascinated with his style and not only the way that he fought, but like the way he would like taunt people in the octagon.
But it
And
wasn't, it was purposeful taunting. Like there was a
yes,
reason for it. He was drawing you in, he
yes.
was trying to snake charm you. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that is, I don't know if anybody has been able to do it to that
No,
ability, to that level since.
I agree. And that was, as a newer fan, I feel like those kind of things stick out to me more because I don't know as much of the technical side of it. Like I didn't know as much about jujitsu and like the different submissions. Like I didn't really know the difference.
Right.
But that was one thing too that I learned when I was watching The Ultimate Fighter. So I went back and watched the season where it was Pulver and BJ Penn were the
Mm-hmm.
coaches. I went back and watched that whole season a couple times. And I watched I think it was Junior Dos Santos was the coach, and I can't remember who was the other
Probably
coach.
Brock
It was
Lesnar,
Brock
because
Lesnar. Yeah, chicken shit and chicken salad. Yeah.
yeah, because that was Tony Ferguson's season.
Yes, I
That
went back
was
and
the
watched that
season we were
season.
introduced to El Kukui.
Yes, I think that's why I love Tony so much too, because I remember that season.
His
Um,
relationship with Brock is just incredible. It's so admirable. It's like big
so
brother, little
funny.
brother, but like to a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. Well, speaking of UFC, did you see that they just got rid of USADA?
It's funny, I didn't know about that, and then right before I got on here, I
I think it just
heard
happened.
somebody had just said that in like a TikTok live I was listening to, and I was like, "What? There's
Yeah,
no
and
more
then
USADA?" And it's being replaced or something, right?
I don't know all of the details on it. All I heard was that I saw there was some quote from like I guess the head guy at USADA, and he was saying something about I don't know. I don't know if something happened, like if they got into a disagreement with I don't know, maybe somebody at Zuffa or Dana
Oh,
White.
wow.
Yeah, it seemed like he was kind of
It's because of Conor McGregor. Why else?
it has to be because of Connor, dude.
Yeah,
It
I
has
know,
to be.
man. I love
Because
it.
Connor really owns the UFC. Pretty much. Like
Nah,
he
look though,
doesn't, but
first
he
thing that
kind of
pops up when
does.
I typed in USADA is USADA announces end of UFC partnership as Conor McGregor re-enters the testing pool. That's a conspiracy right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. That's crazy.
I know.
That's crazy. And it's crazy that they just started working with PFL too.
Wait,
Um,
USADA did?
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's after all those fighters tested positive after like yeah,
They're like,
that's
oh,
just
we need to
not
clean
cool,
this
man.
up.
Yeah, like here's the thing. Joe Rogan has this philosophy where if you're going to enter a sport like MMA where it's like brutal, then you should be as enhanced as humanly possible, but it's like, man, that presents unnatural dangers when you really think about it.
Yeah,
And
for
I don't
sure.
and like MMA is a natural combat. It's you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, because we don't want it to turn into bodybuilding where you pretty much have to be on something in order to
mhm.
compete. Because
Mhm.
those substances are not good for your long-term health. That's the other thing too. It's like there are some, like I guess Joe Rogan, he's always an advocate for like peptides and stuff like that, and with
Yeah,
I guess more of the
it's
recovery side of it, which I guess that
mhm.
probably is a good thing. I think that kind of stuff maybe should be allowed, depending on what it is. But the thing is that yeah, when you start getting on a bunch of different things, like there's some fighters that are going to take it to a whole nother level, and they are
Yeah,
going to
because
be
they want to
juiced to the
have as much
gills.
of an advantage as possible, and that's unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like there's some stuff that isn't allowed, that it's like okay, maybe that would be fine, but then it's like yeah, there are fighters that I feel like would take it to the extreme, and then it just creates it's almost kind of like weight cutting where it's like you have to cut weight now to be able to compete at the highest level. You have to. There's no way around it. Like
Yeah,
so it almost kind of creates like a different playing field. And then, I would hate for some fighters to not be able to compete on the most elite level just because they're not willing to take certain substances,
yeah,
and because it does give you an advantage. And if you don't want to participate in that kind of thing, if you would rather, compete naturally, then it's like, yeah, you almost are automatically at a disadvantage. And so I don't know how I feel about it. I think in certain organizations, it doesn't bother me it being legal, or at least not being like super, super strict.
yeah.
Um, like with bare knuckle and stuff like that. But even then, it's like still it gives you you have more power a lot of times. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it.
It's
It
a double-edged sword. It really
it
is,
is.
and
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. It's just one of those like forbidden subjects, in my opinion, because you need it. Like people will advocate or say be advocates for it and say that you need it to like recover quicker, especially when you're training to be a fighter. But at the same time, that can just be like a cover up for you to be absolutely blasting it to the point where it's an unfair advantage. And
Yep.
at that point,
Yeah,
there's
because there's
no
people that are willing
sport.
to basically, kill themselves to win. I mean, there's people that Yeah, they'll do whatever they can get their hands on, whatever they want to. They don't care about the long-term consequences. They just want to
Yeah.
win, and they
Yeah.
just want to get to the highest level possible. So, yeah, I could see that being a bad thing for sure.
There's just a
Especially
right
just
way
like
and a
long
wrong way to
term.
get to the highest level. And the right way is through just
Yeah.
busting your ass and accepting the journey.
Yeah,
Really
exactly.
think
So
about it.
it'll be interesting to see what happens if they're getting rid of USADA
Yeah, and if they're
and
implementing like a new type of system or a new corporation or something like that,
yeah, I don't know. I don't
because
know.
there
I
is
haven't
WADA,
heard.
but like I don't is WADA even still a thing?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious to see what that's gonna look like. And it's just kind of seems like all of a sudden there's just like a
Wait,
lot of news
this just
this
popped into
week.
my head. Do we think this is happening because of the amount of fights that fall out?
Hmm.
So like with the USADA no
You know
longer
what's
being in
interesting about
partnership with
that?
UFC, that that means they have no testing pool. So you can be taking performance enhancing drugs as a means of recovery or however you see fit.
Yeah, well, and if there's a short notice, if somebody takes a fight on short notice, they don't technically have to be in the pool, do they?
You mean like somebody that's like making their UFC debut?
Definitely not if it's their debut. I know they don't have to be then. Because obviously they can't be.
Yeah. Well,
But
yeah, because you enter it upon your yeah, okay.
I wonder if like if somebody is out of the pool, like let's say they schedule Michael Chandler versus Gamrot or something, and Gamrot
Yeah,
pulls out of the fight, and then Connor says, "Oh, I'm gonna come in on 5 days notice or whatever," but he's
right.
been preparing for it the whole time, and he's on steroids, juiced to the gills, and then he hops in on
I
short
see what you
notice.
mean now.
Is that? Do you
I see
think
what you mean
that's
now.
maybe part of it too? Is that like it? There kind of is no you said because there's
I think
technically a
that
rule
all
in
of these
USADA
are
where they
like
don't
just
have to.
factors. I think well, yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that all of these are possibilities. That's the thing.
it's
I think that
crazy.
anything is a possibility now with this.
I know. The
That's
sport is so crazy. And
I know.
yeah, and it just gets more and more crazy as it evolves too, and especially with there being new organizations like the PFL. And it's like, yeah, like Dana was always gonna make it seem like he's
He's
not
the
worried about
godfather
it.
of MMA.
Yeah, of course. So it's like, yeah, are they gonna take over the UFC? No, of course not. But it is a little bit of a threat to not necessarily, I don't think for viewership. Like, I don't think it's taking away any viewership from the UFC. Because if you watch PFL, you're watching the UFC too. Like,
Right.
otherwise, it's kind of like there's nobody out there really
There's
that's
nobody
not
that only
watching
watches
UFC.
the PFL.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
So yeah, so I don't think the viewership, but I think more so like the talent is the concern for the UFC with PFL and these other organizations. Is they are taking some talent from the UFC, and especially if they're getting this talent early. And I think that's why, I mean, Contender Series this season they gave up 46 contracts.
Yeah, man. Like,
They're not
and
letting
they're
anybody
breaking their
go.
own record every season.
Yeah. Because it's like, well, if they don't sign somebody, there's other places they can go and maybe even get paid more.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they signed so many this season. And the record before it was 43, which is still a lot.
Oh
But I
yeah.
definitely think that because there was even some contracts Dana gave out that I was like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. Um, and but you know what I feel like was kind of, I don't know if I would say was like missing. Well, I don't know. I guess kind of missing is I didn't really, there wasn't anybody this season that I was like, oh, they're going to be like the next star. Like, I can't pinpoint. I don't know if you have any names you think of, but I can't pinpoint one person from the season. Like, you know how there was like those standouts like Sean O'Malley and Bo Nickel. Like there was like
Yeah.
some standouts. I feel like I can't figure out who that is yet. And maybe we just need to see them fight first.
I
Um,
said, no, there was somebody that I had said was like the Bo Nickel of this season. I just don't remember who I said it was. It was weeks ago too. There's no hold on a sec. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
But but yeah, like I was saying with what were we talking about? Oh, contender series standouts.
Hmm.
I really think if there's one person that kind of caught my eye, it was Peyton Talbot, but it was just because of
Yeah.
how like just he's just odd, you know? And it's not
Yeah.
like negative odd, it's like eye-catching odd, you know? You want to
I
see like
agree.
what he's gonna do next. Like and honestly, in a way, he kind of reminded me of Sean O'Malley just because of his fighting style and just because of his like free flow. Like he was just so free in there against who was it? Ray, his name was Reyes Cortez Jr. That's Tracy Cortez's brother.
Right. Yeah,
But
I agree. And I feel like that was one that, and I don't know, I guess I haven't seen it yet, but I feel like that was one that I remember clearly. Like I clearly remember him walking out, or remember his fight. Like I remember seeing that vividly. And there were a couple others, I guess, that I kind of remembered. Like I definitely remember the female fight. I can't remember.
is it from like
um
this past week or 2 weeks
it was
ago?
like a couple weeks ago. I
Was
can't
it
remember for
Carly
the life of me.
Judice and
Yes.
Katscara? Yeah, man, that was a oh
Yes.
my god, that was one of the best fights I've ever
That
seen. One of
was
the
awesome.
best female fights ever. That's up there with Whaley and Joanna, just on a
Oh
lower
my
scale,
God.
which
Such a
is absurd
banger.
to even say because like
On Contender Series. Yeah, it's
their
crazy.
technique was world class, yet they only are 5 fights into their career.
Yeah. That was nuts. That was, yeah, I can't wait to see. I was so glad Dana gave both of them a contract too, because
That's
I
the
was like,
thing
yeah,
about this season that I think was odd. It was a lot of people that weren't favored to win ended up
yeah,
winning and got contracts, so it was unexpected. And then there was a lot of just absolute wars on
yes,
top of that. So you kind of get lost in the underdogs winning and getting the contracts on top of all the hard fought fights that you get to watch. So it just kind of all jumbles together. But the
yeah.
thing is, I think that the talent level of this season and last season is the best that we've seen out of the contender series
Oh
up to
my
this.
God. Yeah. It's gotten to such an elite level. And I think that's why there wasn't really that one like standout for me, just because, yeah, the level of competition now is just so insanely high.
Yep.
And there's so many more fighters now too.
And
And they're
it's
coming from
crazy for
so
me
many
to even
different
say that.
circuits. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Because
it's
with
wild.
Jamal Hill, he won a belt at the beginning of this year, and he was on the contender series in 2019 or 2020,
Yeah,
right?
not that long ago.
Yeah, and that's exactly not 2 years ago. So the amount of names and people that are still like obviously they're working their way up through the rankings, and once they reach that top 15 threshold, that's when you'll really see. But talent wise and skill wise, I mean, like I said, these last 2 seasons, I don't think it compares
No, it's
overall.
been incredible. Yeah, definitely. So I guess kind of moving, getting close to wrapping up the show. What are some of like the fights you're most looking forward to this year? What are some fights that we might not know about that we need to pay attention to? What are some fighters we need to pay attention to? Yeah, what are you looking forward to the rest of the year as we get closer to the end of 2023?
So on like a world class level, like UFC level, all that stuff, I just want to say first and foremost, I'm being given the opportunity to go to the PFL World Championships on November 24th to
Oh,
cover it
that's
with Dylan
awesome.
Rush. And I'm so appreciative of him granting me that opportunity because
Yeah.
that's another experience that like I'm gonna have in the back of my head to be able to implement in future. But there's no fights on that card that I've really seen that like are eye catching because they're all world title fights, and a lot of those matchups, we usually will see like in the previous years. But UFC, I'm definitely intrigued with the Ian Gary and Vicente Luque matchup just because I want to see what wrinkles to Luque's like defensive, mechanics that he brings in order to counteract Ian Gary's striking. There's been a lot of fights announced that I've just completely forgotten about already, just because like I don't like to think about the fights on UFC cards until it's fight week because there's been so many
I know.
cancellations, especially this year. Especially this year. So that's why I kind
Yeah.
of like to keep it like unfamiliarized until I have to know until it's locked in. Like,
Yep.
they're cutting weight, they're in Vegas or wherever the event's happening at, and the fight is going. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, it's really until they make that walk, you never know what's gonna
Exactly.
happen. Yeah, well, and even like this weekend, there was a fight that dropped off the same
Yeah, it
day.
was Felipe Lins and Iwan Kutelaba. Sorry for the
Yeah.
noise.
No, you're good. Uh yeah, well there's definitely some I'm looking forward to. I'm definitely looking forward to UFC 294, especially
Oh
now
yeah.
with it being the rematch.
Oh yeah.
Another I mean, well really they were both rematches, but this one for some reason just excites me just a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
And with it being on short notice too, I think that just adds another layer of like what the heck is going to happen.
Yeah, let's just hope that because there's been some fight fallouts on the Madison Square Garden card for Vola and Benoit Saint Denis was originally supposed to happen, is not happening anymore. So hopefully the
Oh,
UFC can just kind of keep the momentum rolling with matchups and finding good replacements and keeping strong fights alive to close out the year. Because, in my opinion, 2023 has genuinely been probably the most wild year at the highest level of MMA,
yeah. All the
obviously of this
upsets
decade.
too.
Yeah, and the guys that are like making their debuts on short notice and actually getting the wins rather than essentially being fed to the wolves. There's been a lot of those this year as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy time to be an MMA fan. There's
That's what I'm
there's a
saying. There's
lot
so
of
much to be able to keep up with.
yes, there's a ton of good fights on that 294 card. Obviously, we've got Yusuf versus Barboza coming up. That's a big featherweight fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to think what else is coming. I can't even like you said, I can't
We got
even
Sao Paulo, UFC Sao Paulo.
Oh, that's right.
Curtis Blades was originally supposed to fight Jailton Almeida, and now Derek Lewis is stepping in on
Yeah, I
short
forgot
notice.
about that one.
Yeah, and
Oh
it's funny
man.
because Derek Lewis was on a little bit of a skid, right? Last year, and then at the beginning of this year, when he fought Sergey Spivak, he fell victim to the grappling. But his last fight against Delima, he looked like he was in sick shape. Like
Yeah, he's got
that
a six
version of
pack
him.
now.
That's what I'm saying. Like that version of him is a problem for any heavyweight if you really think about it, because he's in
I
the best
agree.
physical condition possible, and he's already shown the ability to be an incredible fighter and athlete with the added mass to him that he doesn't really need as a heavyweight. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
The
I'm
lean, mean
excited.
Derek Lewis machine is scary.
He really is. He's just yeah, he continues to kind of tweak little things and evolve and I don't know. I mean, Gelton Almeida is terrifying,
He's a force.
especially
He's
on
a
the
force to be
ground.
reckoned with.
So that's the thing I worry about with Derek is the ground for sure. But I worried
Yeah.
about that with I don't know. I mean, Curtis Blades I think can hold his own on the ground a little bit better than Derek Lewis, but at
It
the
was a
same
lot. That
time,
stylistic matchup between Curtis Blades and Gilton was what much more intriguing in terms of like seeing
yes.
Gilton get actually potentially tested. Whereas
Right.
now it's really just like a 50-50 where it's either Gilton's going to get knocked out or he's going to manhandle Derek Lewis and submit him or
Yeah.
or
Or he
TKO
manhandles
him.
him for 4 rounds and then Derek Lewis throws one crazy punch and
Yeah,
knocks him
that is a possibility. That is a
It's
serious
crazy because this is a
possibility.
5 round fight, right?
Yeah,
Is that
it's
the
a
main
main
event?
event. I'm about to look up the lineup for that
That could easily
specific
happen.
card.
That could easily happen. I think if I were betting on Derek Lewis, I would probably bet on him getting a late
A
knockout,
late
like a
knockout,
fourth or fifth
100%.
round. But I would also bet on Almeida getting like a first or second round submission. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's why heavyweight's so fun to watch too, because you just never know what the heck is gonna happen in there.
Yeah, and even Tom Aspinall said it. He was like, it's just a completely different sport, heavyweight MMA.
It is. It is.
Okay,
It's crazy.
I got the bout order for Sao Paulo up. Elvis Brenner, that name ring a bell. He fought Guram
He
Kutateladze in a
on
war.
he
He's
wasn't
one
on
of
Contender Series, was he?
He might have been. I believe he was not
I don't know why
not
that
this
name sounds
past
really
year.
familiar.
He fought Kuta Taladze in a war not too long ago over
Oh,
the
is he the one that
summer.
got cut?
Yeah, he had the blonde hair and he had yes. And he came
Yep,
back and won it late. He's
that was
fighting
crazy.
yeah, he's fighting Esteban Ribovics, and Esteban Ribovics is a dog. I was at you. He fought at UFC 285, and then he fought Kamwela Kirk at UFC 290, and like I had my eye on him specifically just because of his style. But he's one of those guys that's continually improving with every fight, and obviously with the win Brenner just had, like that's a match, like
It's
circumstantial
gonna be
wise,
fun.
that's going to be a fun fight. And then we got Rodolfo Vieira versus Armin Petrosian. I mean,
Oh,
both those guys have been in the UFC for a good amount of years now. So that
yeah, that's
and
interesting.
it's a kind of a striker versus grappler matchup.
That's gonna be fun. Yeah, that's a fun card.
Kyle Bohio, and Abus
Oh yeah,
Magomedov.
he's yeah, which is that's the last guy that Strickland fought
Yep,
before the title fight.
yep,
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw that one.
yeah.
Cuz Cal, I know he's been kind of hyped a little bit. And
Justifiably so, in my opinion.
yeah, he's good. He's
He's good.
dangerous. Yeah, that'll be interesting. That's a fun card. I always love watching
A lot of under the radar
Brazilians.
fights. Yeah, a lot of under the radar Brazilians on that card, in my opinion.
That'll be fun. Yeah, I'm excited. Lots of good stuff coming up.
But then, yeah,
Um,
after that is MSG, and then
yeah.
following that, we got like the December cards, which I don't think have been fully mapped out just yet. But like, I feel like
Mm-mm.
depending on how the Abu Dhabi card goes and the rest of October and the first half of November goes, like if guys don't take a lot of damage, they'll probably end up taking short notice fights.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, and who knows? We could see if Volkanovski, if he beats Islam, he could still end up fighting Topuria
Ilya
in
in
January.
January, yeah, which would be
I
insanity.
know.
Insanity. That man would just be running the sport.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, that's a for a title fight, a quick turnaround. So I guess it depends on how the fight goes. Like if Volkanovski can get out of there with very minimal damage and get like if he can
But if it's a
somehow, I don't think
competitive
it's gonna
fight,
happen.
everybody's gonna warrant the trilogy. You got to also
Yeah,
take that into consideration.
exactly. That's a thing. So if Volkanovski wins, I think I would rather see him kind of take a break for a second and just prepare for that trilogy.
Yeah.
And then maybe they do Topuria versus Max for interim belt or something like that. I don't know. I think that if Volkanovski wins, I just don't really want to see him go back down to featherweight. I want to see him stay at
Right.
lightweight.
Right.
Because then also who knows? Like um, maybe there's another title fight for him, at lightweight too, unless because I mean I
Well,
guess
that's the
Islam
thing
would
too, is
probably
all
want to
these weight
do.
classes now, especially today, if we're talking today right now, every weight class in the UFC is at the highest point, like from top 15 to top 10. It's all kind of just shuffling. It's a big shuffle.
It
Think
is.
about Bobby
Yeah,
Green just finished Grant Dawson this past week. Bobby
I
Green was
know.
always kind of on the outside looking in terms of top 15, top 10, immediately reinserted back into the rankings. And if you think about the end of 2022, Drew Dober knocked Bobby Green out. Like
Yeah.
it's
And
just
Drew Dober just had a
crazy.
great performance too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's just crazy that the ball kind of keeps moving. You kind of got to just keep moving
Oh,
and
you know what
evolving
they
with the
should
game.
do? If Volkanovski beats Islam 294, they should do Islam Volkanovski 3 UFC 300.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel like
But the
that
thing
the
is,
stars would have
there's a
to align so
possibility.
perfectly.
Yeah, there's a possibility neither of them have the belt by the time UFC
I
300 rolls
know.
around.
That's great.
That's
But that's going to
crazy to
be
think
like what?
about.
Like March, April though?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is that's usually when Islam fights, either October or springtime usually is when he
Yeah, true.
fights.
True, true, true.
So who knows? Who knows? It's exciting. It's
I
exciting.
know. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a fight fan.
Oh, it definitely is. It's the perfect time to be a fight fan. Well, it's been really great talking to you. I appreciate
Likewise.
your MMA knowledge and your takes. I love it.
Thank you. Likewise. It was fun. It was fun just conversing, kind of picking your brain and just kind of
Yeah.
indulging you, I guess, with my knowledge, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of here's my problem. Not even a problem. I just kind of force myself to try and know as much as I can without knowing too much of anything. So it's all
Yeah.
sort of it seems like it's just broad surface level knowledge, but like I can add on to things. That's a good factor I have.
It's always good hearing different perspectives too. And I think it makes you better as an MMA content creator to like have other people on and like talk to them about MMA, get their opinions on things. Cause it kind of makes you think about the sport differently or things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love talking to fighters about MMA too,
Mm-hmm.
because they just have a completely different perspective. Or even talking to people who don't train at all, who are like casual fans. I think it's fun because they have a completely different perspective. So it's
And
always fun.
it's not a good perspective sometimes. Some of those guys are harsh critics without even really placing
Oh, I
themselves
know.
on the mats and understanding like the amount of vulnerability that comes with training in a sport like that, and then they double back into their phone screen and have the I just can't
Yeah,
believe
there's a
they
lot
can
of that.
slander fighters when fighters are like some of the most brave and courageous humans that we have.
Yeah, it seems like the best MMA fans are always people who like talk to fighters or like have trained or at least have some sort of tie to the community
Yeah,
because I feel like sometimes it's just people who are just watching it and they're commentating on it the way they would commentate like football or basketball and it's like no, like
it's not the
this is
same.
not a game. This is
Yeah,
not a game. Like you are
yes.
playing with fire in the
It's
ring.
a
Like
human game of chess. It's
yeah.
chess with limbs and motion.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We need a little bit more, I guess, probably educating our fan base a little bit, which is kind of what, what people like us are trying to do with creating content and giving that perspective. And that's why I love having the fighter interviews and doing the breakdowns too. I think
Mhm.
it's important to do both because you do get to kind of share the fighter's story, you get to share their perspective on things, and that's how you really learn and grow as an MMA fan and as a an analyst, a content creator, whatever you want to call what we do. But
Yeah, no, but just allowing
yeah,
yourself to understand what those guys go through is such a big
yes.
factor because they'll have a different type of respect for you than they will than the little Timmy that's just chatting shit on his phone on Instagram, you know?
Yeah, I oh my gosh, yeah, sometimes I just shake my head at the
Literally,
comments
that's
I
all you
see
can do.
sometimes.
That's all you can
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, well, even like on my own content, I get comments sometimes, and I'm like, okay, well, here's why they did this, or here's what happened. Like, here's why this makes sense. Like, trying to educate people a little bit. Some people are going to be a know it all, though, and they're just going to be like, oh, well,
Some people
this
don't
fighter
want to hear it
sucks.
either. Yeah, some people just don't want to hear it, and in that case, you just kind of got to like leave it at it as it is
Yeah.
and move on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
there's a
no, I
lot of
really.
I feel like we're getting better. I feel like more people are training too that are MMA
Mhm.
fans, which is good. I think that's
That's
good.
great.
And that's kind of why I wanted to get back into training too with like getting back into doing MMA content cuz I was like, well, I'm going to understand this sport so much better if I'm training while I'm kind of doing this stuff. And
Hmm.
so even if I'm not, training to become a fighter, like I want to train like I were to become a fighter. Like the way
Yep.
that I am learning and taking away things like we said earlier, just training with intention and yeah, I'm just trying to learn and absorb as much as I can and not go into the gym thinking I know everything, like go in there just kind of that's why I
You got
kind
to
of
be a
said I wanted to start
sponge.
over. Yeah, just like starting from scratch just so I can be like, all right, I know nothing. Even though yeah, like I've sparred before, like I've sparred with some really good people too and I've trained with some really good people and I've trained with, former Bellator fighters and so it's like yeah, I have the knowledge is there, but at the same time I don't want that to cross over and prevent me from learning something new and learning from a different perspective cuz yeah, I think it's important to just kind of yeah, have like a blank slate if you will and um really absorb like listen to your coaches, your teammates and just kind of be like, "Okay, I know nothing. Just teach me." and I'm just going to absorb all the knowledge, and I'm going to observe, what you guys are doing and take away different things from each person at the gym and
100%.
different coaches. So yeah,
That's
and then
the
paying
best
attention to the
approach.
sport too, and looking at kind of the small details, and kind of considering that. And I think that's one thing that training helps you with in watching MMA and being a fan, is just those small details that go into it, that you're like, oh, they switched stances, and
Yeah.
then they threw this, and you notice
Switch
things like that
stances
more.
into a feint just to see if he would bite, and he didn't.
Right.
So he went back to his other stance.
Yeah,
Like, that's
those are the
not
things you
how a
notice.
casual fan is going to be
No.
thinking when they're watching a fight.
Yeah, 100%. But you appreciate it so much more, and like you appreciate those fighters that are maybe not a big name yet, or maybe they are just getting started, and you notice little things that they do, and you're like, oh, I can tell that they have some skill because they did this. And yeah, I think that's important, and I think that's another thing that we could probably do better to educate our fan base on, is just kind of telling the fighter's story, which is why I like when they do the UFC embedded and things like that, because I know the casual fans are more likely to watch that than they are to watch like my
Yeah, because
podcast.
it's like a well, yeah, exactly, because that's like a reality show. It's like an inside scoop, like,
Yeah.
first look, all that type of detail that
Yeah, it'll be interesting to
entrances the
see if they have
casual
any
fans.
footage from, I'm sure they'll probably have footage of like Volkanovski and Islam leading up to this fight. They'll probably hopefully be promoting it heavily. So
Hell
I'm
yeah. I'm sure they
excited.
just got to it. I'm sure they just got to Abu Dhabi, like, or
Yeah.
they're still on their way. But either way, like,
Yeah, it's
what,
gonna be
like I
fun.
said already, what a time to be a fight fan.
Yes, it is. Well, I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yes,
This
again,
was a great
thank you so much for
conversation.
having me. 100%.
Yeah, hit me up anytime you want to chat MMA and get our takes on things. And I appreciate you checking out my content and my podcast, and I'll definitely be checking out yours. And I saw you were trying to post more on Instagram, so that's good, because I'm mostly on Instagram, so I don't really see as much on other platforms. So that's good.
And that's the problem too, is most of my I've gained a bit of a traction on TikTok, but I know like a lot of people like to not go on TikTok because it's just it's a very toxic app. So I get that. So I'm gonna have to, I gotta cater to the more based audience, which is Instagram. Yeah,
well, we'll try to we'll improve at the same time. Like a lot of other content creators like I've had on here, or people like I've been on their show, or people I just watch their content. Like we try to, send each other little tidbits like, hey, I did this the other day and this, helped me, and or just like learning about MMA too. Yeah, the group chat's fun. Solid. Yeah, it's fun.
Everybody's got pure intentions, regardless of like the banter or anything like that. Like we're all like trying to see each other flourish and get to like the point that we want to be, and it's just cool because we're doing it. Yep,
100%. Yeah, I'm excited to see where everybody goes. I mean, there's a lot of young guns coming up in MMA media, so I'm excited. I'm excited. Well, cool. Well, I'll let you get back to your evening. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thanks again for having me. It was awesome. You have a good rest of your night.
You too. I'll see you.